Well, we don't always like to date our podcast, Whitney, or I don't know if we do. I don't.
Wait,
as
date our
far
podcast?
as far as like indicating by our content the time of year and the time it is, because we record ahead of time. And so, you might be like, wow, I'm really glad UFOs have never landed. And then we publish in 2 weeks and it's just like, they have. And people are like, where are these people living? Right? You want to keep that mystery going. But that said, so far UFOs haven't landed, so that's good, or whatever we call them. Yeah. But also it's summer. I don't know what it is where people are listening, and here in Amsterdam, lovely place. It's great when it's summer, but they don't really have air conditioning technology, and so I was now that I'm saying this out loud, maybe asking you who's living in Texas are the wrong person to ask, but if you could think back maybe to the past, what are your cool tips for keeping cool when it's hot outside? Like, do you have some complicated system of like windows and doors and fan things, or like what do you do to deal with hotness when there's no AC?
So I just got home from a trip to Japan. I was in Japan for 2 weeks. And like getting off the airplane, being in Seattle, actually, where I was at a layover, I had 2 big impressions of being back in the States. And one is our beeps are really loud and aggressive when they could be cute little songs. And the second one is, damn, it's cold here. Like we crank up the AC everywhere. It was freezing. So I got used to the less AC, but Japan was hot. And some things that happen locally in Japan, some of which I bought into and will use at home. One is in Japan, it's totally normal to carry around a sun umbrella, and they sell like UV umbrellas all over the place. So you have your portable bit of shade, which I found very, very helpful. And I got one and I intend to use it. And then the other one is they had, so many people had little teeny personal fans that they would just blow.
Okay.
Yeah. Move the air in front of their face around.
I like that.
To keep cool. Yeah. So I think, I live in Texas, but Texas is just blast the AC. I kind of like Japan's solutions better. They're a little more elegant.
Yeah. I feel like the Texas solution to it being hot outside is don't go outside. Like that's
exactly.
problem solved.
Anyway, we should get down to business and introduce our guests. We have AmyJune here with us today. AmyJune, how do you keep cool?
Well, I do like the solution of not going outside, but I just recently spent like some subsequent vacations in Las Vegas, Reno, Albuquerque, and I went to Portland last weekend and it had a heat wave. I live in the Northern California Bay Area, so I don't typically get a lot of hot weather. So I feel like I'm dealing with the heat a little bit differently right now at this moment in time from having those 4 really hot adventures and just being thankful. But I'm a big fan of the fan, carrying around the fan. I have one in my purse, and I just kind of carry it around. And we also do a lot of wet cloths. Right now, I can't have my air conditioning on, but I also can't really have a wet cloth on my neck because it would look kind of silly. But I'm a big fan of the wet cloth.
In Japan, first of all, let me clarify that the Japan fan was a motorized fan, like a small version of it. But the second thing is you're talking about a wet cloth around your neck. In Japan, there was a thing that almost looked like cheesy 90s headphones, but it was actually meant to be worn around your neck and you freeze it. So it's like this gel-filled thing you freeze, and then you can wear it around your neck as another way to keep cold and keep cooler in Japan.
I like that.
You got it right over there.
Yeah, I like this idea of like a cold towel. That could be nice, because then you also have the towel
freeze that too.
for like when you're all sweaty and you want to wipe your face, like which is good. I grew up with like lots of people carrying around like hand towels all the time. It seemed like a wise thing to do. And around Austin. Well,
so
there you go.
AmyJune, will you tell us about yourself and who you are and what you do?
Sure. I'm a little bit older in life, so I've gone through a couple iterations of lifetimes, right?
I identify with that.
I grew up in Northern California on a farm.
Cool.
So I'm eventually going to like go back to that. That's my life goal, is going back to Northern California and having a farm. But my first bout in life, I was a mechanical engineer, didn't like it. So I worked for a Volkswagen air-cooled machine shop. And if like people follow me on the different medias, I'm Volkswagen chick. And that's where that name comes from, is I was a Volkswagen mechanic, which was really rad. So I have really cool Volkswagens now. Yeah. And then I'm a hospice nurse by trade. But there was a point in my life where I came home and we played this game at work called Chocolate or Poop, where you like look at your sleeve and you're like, is that part of my lunch, or was that from like, you know? So I got home and it was on my skin versus my scrubs. And I'm like, ooh, you know what? I don't want to play this chocolate versus poop game anymore. And so there was like, I know, right? There's this like period of my life where I was like doing some like content entry for websites and stuff like that. I'd like to think of myself as a Luddite by heart, but I was working with Drupal. And for those people that are going to ask, you know, is Drupal still relevant? Yes, we're still around. So I got into Drupal.
I want to ask something more remedial than that, which is, what is Drupal?
Okay. Oh, so Drupal is PHP based, which you don't have to know because also people are like, PHP is still around. It's a content management system for the web. I hate to do this, but if people know what WordPress is, it's like WordPress, but completely better and displays dynamic content, you know, things like theweather.com is on there. Most colleges are on Drupal. You know, it's a building a website interface for people to build a website. So you put your content in and it pops up a pretty website for you. So,
nice.
So I got into Drupal, very quickly discovered that coding wasn't for me. That's fine. So I got into the people side. Turns out a lot of coders aren't people. So I got into the people part, got into like organizing camps and things like that. Eventually sort of moved to a company which we shall not be named, but they have the word red in their name. So I worked for them for a little while on opensource.com and learned a lot about open source and was amazed by it. And so I could not get enough of the idea and the feel of what open source meant. And then things happened because that company doesn't care about open source that much. So I got picked up by the Linux Foundation, and I helped the Linux Foundation keep a portfolio of exams. So that's sort of the thing, but mostly like I like punk rock and chickens and goats and loofahs and things. So yeah.
Punk rock, chicken, goats, loofah, Linux exams. And it sounds like you still are a hospice nurse. You said that in present tense?
I am, because what if something happens in tech, like we all have to become Luddites one day, right? And because there's nothing, society crashes, there's no more technology. It's really hard to go back and re-get your nursing certificate. So I've always kept it up to date. And I'm glad I did, because when the shelter in place happened, there was a real need for me to go back to work. And so that sort of inspired me to work a little bit more often to help out my fellow nurses who don't necessarily get breaks, don't necessarily get holidays off. And my kids are grown and I only work, 40 hours a week, where they're working 60 hours a week. And so I do hospice nursing a few times a year now, just to kind of keep up and really feel the important things in life, So it kind of like puts you into like a mindset of like, oh, you know what, this thing that's happening in my kitchen isn't so bad. So
I have about 1,000 questions based on everything you just said. But my first one is the chocolate or poop game. How do you actually tell which is which? Is it a smelling thing?
You change your scrubs, or you fold them up. No, it's a game where you don't want to win
if you never answer the question.
Yeah, I guess in the long term, if you play it long enough, you realize you never want to know the answer. You just
you can lick it.
It isn't exactly. Yeah. Sometimes you cope with bad things by making them funny. I in one of my hotel rooms recently that I couldn't change the room, there was just like a cockroach in the room, and I was just like, oh, that's my new friend's cookie for cucaracha, and just make a buddy and just go, and that's okay. This is my week now, and it's fine.
Did your buddy disappear in the morning? Like what, or did you lose them?
My buddy stuck around a couple of days. At some point, they were laying on their back, and then I helped them out the door that way with a cup and a paper. Classic.
Yeah. Wow. That's a good move. The cup and paper.
I guess since this is a tech podcast, maybe we'll start with the tech stuff. So you work at Linux Foundation and you work with exams, and that's how you and I met, is because you helped facilitate making the Platform Engineering Associates exam, and I helped make the content for that exam. But I thought the exam making process was really interesting. Let's just talk through it. Like, what's step one? How do you even know that you want to make an exam about something?
So that's beyond my realm of doing, but I understand what they do is there's some market research that happens, when we go to KubeCon, when we go to Open Source Summit, when we do our AI conferences, we have the Linux Foundation education team has a booth and people come up and talk to us. They've taken exams before. People who have projects will come up to us and ask us like, oh, why don't you do content on this? Underneath the Linux umbrella is the CNCF, the Cloud Native Computing Foundation. So they will come to us often with ideas for projects for exams. Until this Platform Engineering Associate exam, we were doing a lot of projects, like we do an exam on Backstage, something real specific, an exam on Argo, This was a little bit different, but there was such a feel for it and such a need for it. So we make sure that we have enough for the associate level exams that I work on. It is associate level. They're minimally qualified candidates, usually in the field for 6 to 12 months. We define that with our subject matter experts. But we really make sure that there's a market for that type of exam too, because we spend a lot of time on it, because from start to finish, it could take 3 months. It could take a year for me to get all of the things in place for it to go general availability. So that's the first step, is making sure that it's relevant in our landscape. Are there going to be enough people who want to take the content? Is there enough content out there where they can study for the exam too? And then once we do that, go ahead.
An associate's exam is always multiple choice. Is that correct?
For what I do, we do have some performance-based exams that are for associate levels, but the ones I work on are multiple choice exams. So they're pretty straightforward, testing a lot of knowledge base, like making sure people have an understanding versus a implementation part of it. The performance-based are more implementation, and then we're more, seeking knowledge sort of thing.
So the Linux Foundation is okay, we definitely want to make an exam about fill in the blank, about this subject, about chocolate versus poop. Amy, Amy, you're up here. Now that's where you come into the picture. Okay. And then what do you do?
I come in as a subject matter expert. I help create a blueprint, which the general population can see eventually, but we come up with domains and competencies. We come up with tasks how many people, when I go home and test for poop on my elbow, how often do I do that? How critical do I do that? So we put out a survey asking about these tasks and their criticality. And then we come up with that blueprint of those domains and subdomains. And then that's what we based our content on. So we do come up with a panel, advisory panel for the subject matter experts, who we think is going to lend the most expertise. And this is something I'm really proud of that I've been working on a lot within the education team, is making sure that our SMEs are diversified, making sure that when we have that advisory panel, there's diversity across all the different things, socioeconomics, geographic, gender or perceived gender, all of those things. And so it makes it a little bit more difficult because I'm in one time zone and I have an Australian and we have to get together. But we do try to make sure that we're, especially something like that platform engineering exam, is making sure that we have a really cool representation of who uses the software. Because Whitney, you use the software so much different than Chris, who works in a bank, uses the software. So we want to make sure that we can represent that, because when we then have that blueprint created, we move into item writing. And again, I open up to more SMEs. I do a general hey, who wants to work on these things? And I kind of do a little bit of an interview with people.
As an outsider, how do you find your subject matter experts?
We rely a little bit on the our stakeholders who came to us with the project, hey, who do you know in the community? But I'll go into, if I know something's coming up, I'll just use Drupal because we're never going to do Drupal because we're not part of the LF, but I'll use that as an example. I know that I'm going to be creating a Drupal project or a Drupal exam in 6 months. I'll infiltrate myself. I'll go to KubeCon and sit at the Drupal table. I'll go into Facebook groups. I'll go into the documentation. I'll go into the issue queue and I'll meet people because it's so much easier for them to not say no if they don't know me. So I kind of get my little feelers out there and I meet people I'll ask you, Whitney, oh, you do this. Do you know anyone who does this? And I'm a people person. So I use those sort of social things to really kind of get those feelers out, whether it be chat-based or in-person based. But then we also do these general.
I was going to say, I think I became involved, if memory serves, with helping to make the CPNA exam by answering, I think in Slack in the platform engineering channel on the CNCF. There was if you're interested, I think
and I'll do that. I threw
my hat in.
And then we'll do this was a really big one for the CNCF. So they announced it at KubeCon in Salt Lake City, and the table afterward just sort of swarmed with people wanting to help. And then we put out a little form that says, hey, do you want to help? And we asked a little bit of information. But sometimes, I spend a little bit more time seeing who makes more commits, who's in there answering forum questions, who's being a leader in their community to ask to that advisory panel versus content SMEs, but it is a lot of social media and just a lot of word of mouth too. Yeah. So that's why it's easier for us to make sure that we represent a project that is, that has that level of enthusiasm too. It's really hard to write something when you only have 6 SMEs who are only mildly interested in what they're writing, and that's what makes your group so much fun. I loved your group so much because y'all knew each other and there's banter and there's things and y'all worked on it and got done. And it was just so much fun.
I had fun on my side too. Yeah.
But, after we gather all those, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to ask what you're about to say. So you have the subject, you have gathered your subject matter experts, you have your advisory panel that writes the high level, what this exam is about. And now you're ready to write the actual questions.
Yeah,
is that what's next?
There's one step before that when we ask people that task list, how is important that you check your elbow for poop. How important is that? Is that something you do every day? Is that something you do 3 times a day? Is that something you only do once a month? And that helps weight the exam questions, because when we create a blueprint, which we then put into our exam building platform, it determines how many questions we ask about each thing. So once the blueprint is made, we kind of weight it, and then we start item writing, and then item writing, it's a big fun show of, getting people used to the platform and writing content. And I don't know how deep in the weeds you want me to go into that, but once you do item writing.
I'm interested in checks and balances.
Sure.
How are you sure that blueprint is an accurate representation of the entire community?
Okay, so after we do that job task analysis where we get those criticality scores, we go back to that advisory panel, or we go back to the advisory panel plus 10 other SMEs who we feel are knowledgeable enough to give us input, and we make sure that the blueprint looks good.
Okay.
So remember, this is an associate level exam. So we really make sure that the people who are approving these items understand that, you might have been a platform engineer for 6 years, but what did you do that first 9 to 12 months? And then how has it changed since you started? And it's okay that we have easy and hard items because we do betas and reviews. And if they're too hard, they kind of, or if they're too...
It seems like it could be a problem if someone knows too much. They don't remember what it's like to be a 6 to 12 month.
Oh, for reviewing our content?
Yeah, you're too much of an expert. You're going this,
Yeah, you wouldn't know. Just get a cup and a piece of paper to get the roach out. I had to teach that to my kids. I don't even think of that. You just do it.
And that's why it's important that when you stepped in, we were doing a lot of group reviews. We'd have 8 or 6 to 10 SMEs on a call and looking at an item, and we would talk about it, and someone would say, oh, yeah, I've never done that in my 16 years of, or however long, platform engineering. But someone will say, yeah, but most people do. So we do have those discussions, because as much as I say I don't know tech, when I review items, I'll do a pass, and then I'll flag the ones I'm not sure or that they seem too hard. And those are the ones I'll take to that group review where we have a wider discussion about whether or not it's too hard. But we also run beta tests, which weed out items as well. And we try to have that beta be just people who we are targeting for that candidate.
Who writes the questions?
SMEs.
Okay.
The wider SMEs. So it's when I do that broadcast of who's interested, we'll refine it for the advisory council, and then I'll do a quick review and check people's LinkedIn profiles, check them against issue queues or the Get projects and things like that. Make sure that they're experts like they say they are, and then we open it up to wider people. So we might just have 6 to 9 people on that advisory panel, but we might have 20 to 40 people writing content.
Okay. So they show that they're interested. You vet them, then they're qualified to write to write questions.
And it's okay that the SMEs have only been working 6 to 9 months too, because they're almost the perfect people, because they were just doing it. They're just learning. They know what is the thing. So that's why I like to have that balance of, all the skill sets, all the roles, all the things. So
what do you think, what are things that the as you say, the SMEs that you want, that they could be doing more of, that you could find them better, right? You went through a lot of things, but you must, I imagine you've noticed a few, or maybe a lot of people, you're like, if you had just done this, I could have found out that you were a person faster to do this.
So I don't have the answer to that. If I did, we'd be writing a million exams, right?
Right.
But I come from a developer relations background. I work for opensource.com. So I know a lot of people. I go to a lot of conferences. I know people who know people. So a lot of it is word to mouth, or word mouth to word.
Word of mouth.
Word of mouth. There we go.
It sounds weird now. That is.
Yeah. But I don't have that recipe. I think sometimes I'm not going to use the word easier because it's reductive, but sometimes it's the process is more streamlined when we have something like the CNCF making announcements at KubeCon in front of 12,000 people. That's an easy way to do it. But I think most of the time it's just getting people to sign up for that sign up form that we have, being like, hey, I'm a SME, and here's the things that I can contribute.
Right. So it's so there's the word of mouth, if I have that phrase right. But it sounds like a lot of the work is people self-selecting for it, and then you vetting them, basically, kind of seeing it if it applies, versus you're discovering the great writer out there who's going to be great at this, but just has never gotten around to it.
But I do that too, because I look at who's giving talks at ArgoCon. I'm looking at who's giving talks at the AI stuff, and not that talking is the only indicator of how smart people are. There's all different ways we can share our knowledge, but I do read articles. I do do LinkedIn. I see what people are sharing, and so I remember and keep track of those things too. So I will reach out to people, and they'll be like, "Okay, weirdo. No, I don't want to help you, but oh yeah, I love that project. I totally want to help you give back to open source in a meaningful way, because it's also a contribution. You don't get a whole lot of contribution street cred for it, but open source isn't about that. Open source is about some altruistic behavior too, right? And so I find SMEs who really want to work on it altruistically, and people who are paid to do it too. But those altruistic SMEs are the most enthusiastic about it.
Sure, yeah, they have their passion. Well, so I don't know specifically, but I imagine in the nursing area, there's lots of certifications that you have to take and be updated on, and in the even using the word engineering, if I remember in Oregon, a programmer can't call themselves an engineer, but in the engineering world, it's always been like, oh, we should have certification. We should not have certification. Like anyone can call themselves a developer. And like, since you live in these two worlds that are very different when it comes to certification, like one is like, yes. And the other one's like, sure. like what, I don't know. What do you think about the lack of it being a required thing to be a professional developer or operations person? Like, is that good, bad, or what's your thoughts on that?
So I come from both sides of that coin, and they're not printed the same. One has heads and one has tails. Coming from the idea of those people who did not have the privilege of going to college or university for that selected technology they're working on. Like I have a mechanical engineering degree and I work in nursing, So some people don't have that privilege of being able to go back to school when they've maybe made the wrong selection or choice of careers when they were 18 years old. But also some people just don't have the privilege because their socioeconomics or their family composition or geographically can't go to college. So I think like certifications have that value. So you don't spend $12,000 at university, but you spend $250 on a certification, or you can get it for free, or you can get it for discount. That shows that you have that skill level, especially in this really tough job market for the last 3 years where there's layoffs all across tech. We have a lot of people switching careers. I do value where people come in and they have like a job interview and they do like a tech check, or, maybe they're paid to work on a project before they're hired on full time. So they can do a tech check that way. But also having that certification helps people kind of level up. And it helps those human resource people that don't know how to ask the right qualifying questions to be like, oh, they have this certain level of knowledge. But I also believe that you should be able to go and improve that level of knowledge without that, and I shouldn't be saying that from the LF education point of view, but I really think that this is, like, I've been in that job market recently, and it is really hard, especially if you're switching careers. Do you need to go back to school for another 2 years to get your computer science degree? No, just take a couple performance-based exams, start doing something. And, it's sort of that same value for the people looking for that skill set, I think.
And like, yeah. And I mean, I'm also interested in a comparison, like, well, now you've got 3 domains, right? Because, well, I don't know, but I would imagine there's also some certification-y stuff in mechanical engineering, like, maybe depending on what you're doing, like, and so like, I think well, there's 2 things. One, like you raise an interesting point that I haven't thought of in this way, but like something like a certification can sound like a barrier, but also depending on the pricing, it can actually be a cheap way to get into something versus like, even 2 years of school, or let alone 4 years and then doing stuff. So it actually, if it's not insanely expensive, which most of the certifications in the IT world are not insanely expensive, it's a good way to get in. Now, but then, not but in a contrary way, but then if I think about like, nursing or medicine types of big E engineering, like I think you usually do need that certification and training. And so the thing I wonder in my mind is like, when is it a good idea to have like big time certification versus like, I took a series of exams and like I showed that I know what I'm doing versus I've been through the process of showing I know what I'm doing.
Maybe it's a matter of how much damage you can cause by messing it up. Like in nursing, if you don't know what you're doing, someone will literally die.
Right. Well,
as
I work in hospice.
In engineering.
I work in hospice, so that's best case scenario. No, sorry.
I have questions, but yes.
But sometimes, like when you're looking to level up in your career path, sometimes going from that associate level exam and taking that performance-based exam where you can prove your skill set might be important, or might be that like qualifier for someone like, human resources being like, hey, we have these exam coupons. Whoever passes the exam is in contention for this thing, show that you can implement. But with saying that, not everyone tests well too. And we have to remember that, not all of us have fluent or native English speaking skills. And some of these things that aren't translations can get, can be biased towards non-native speakers. So that's something to take into account too when we're thinking about who's passing these exams, right?
What's a day in the life
Yeah.
of a hospice nurse like? A day in the life.
Okay, so this is, well, I do it now, but I'm a little bit seasoned and a little bit weathered and a little bit like, been doing it for a while, left and came back during the pandemic. So I have a different point of view about the, all of the things. But, I work night shift because more people die at night, and I am in it for that. Like, I worked in ICU and NICU for a while. I did emergency room care. I did geriatrics. And when I was I know some of these, not all of these acronyms people might know, but ICU's intensive care unit, where we have people coming in with like a knife wound or a bullet shot, or maybe they've had they fell off a ladder and their like head is busted open. And you're sitting there and you're pounding on people, and they want to be alive. Their family wants them to be alive. And you know that only 20% of those people are going to make it, but you're doing all these like really severe things to their body. It really hurt me. And I remember, this isn't the hospice nurse part, I know, but I have to give the context. I remember at the end of each one of those ICU shifts, I would have to go to a coffee shop, go to a bookstore before I could go home and be with my kids, because I was just so bothered by it. And so finally during one of my reviews, the director of nursing was like, I think I have what you're going to be good at. You're going to work in hospice. And I'm like, ooh, that's creepy. I don't know. I worked a hospice shift. I held someone's hand. They chose that moment in time to pass, and it was with me holding their hand. And I felt like this, just like, wow, what a privilege to move these people into the next world. It was like reverse doula, like reverse midwife. And I never looked back after that. I quit working at the hospital. I lived in Bend, Oregon at the time, and we had the privilege of having a hospice house. There was 8 beds of just people imminent death. You didn't really know those people because they were already in there, without medications, but the family was your patients. So the day in the life starts, going in and checking in and seeing who's around, and then seeing if there's some aides around that you can clean people up and you can make them feel like their best selves, and have their family feel like that they're their best selves when more family flies in, or even private healthcare. You're taking the caregiving, you're moving the caregiving from the family or external caregivers, and you're letting them be friends and family again, which is really a nice feeling. And you're taking over that caregiving role. And then I personally, I love being in someone's room with them the whole time. Sometimes they don't have family with them, or sometimes the family goes home at night. And so I sit with people. And then, once they pass it.
How long is this process?
It depends.
How long is someone in hospice?
It depends. Well, I think in our society, people should be in palliative care a lot longer than they are, where they're not actively trying to live anymore, where people are kind of getting used to the idea that they're going to be moving on soon. But hospice is generally the last 6 months. But where I work in the hospice house, it's maybe the last 3 to 6 days.
Oh, okay. So
sometimes people would come in conscious, and you stop taking the medications. You're just making them comfortable. They slip into sleep. A lot of people slip into sleep. But, in hospice, it isn't always about cancer. It isn't always about Alzheimer's or growing old. Sometimes it is that person that fell off the ladder. And it's a little bit more shocking for the family. And so depending on why people are dying, or how they choose to die, can affect the level of care you give them and the level of attention that the family needs.
Do you feel like you're seeing people at their worst or at their best?
Well, a little bit of both. It depends on how prepared they are. Some people are really scared, and that's why holding hands is an important job. Sometimes people are done. They're just
I actually don't even mean the person dying. I mean the families too, humanity in general.
That's a hard one too. It really depends on I would say, like I said, they're all different, but, generally to stereotype if I can. If it's a husband and wife, and the wife's been passing away for 6 months, the husband's ready to let go. But maybe the daughter or the son haven't been with them that long and are just flying in that last week. It's harder for them to let go, right?
Yeah.
And then when we have these very chaotic moments where imminent death was really fast, sometimes nobody's ready to let go. even the patient
Okay.
themselves, so it's like all over the place. Depends on religion, depends on
I
mindset.
kind of relate because as a wedding photographer, I really got to know people's families at a like stressful moment. And sometimes the families were like wonderful and support each other and pull together. And sometimes they were like the meanest to each other. Like,
Dicks, right?
but it was, you really get to see the core of who they are really quickly, for better or worse.
Yeah. But I like that feeling. Like, I was very selfish, and that's why I moved into hospice. I just like that privilege of being with someone when they were moving on, but
are you desensitized to death? I feel like I'm desensitized to weddings.
No, I still use the humor and stuff like that. No, every time someone passes away with me, I feel that, and then every time like I have to leave someone because they haven't passed away yet, I'm a little like, okay, I don't know who the nurse is coming on. Maybe I should extend my shift, I like to joke around about it because that helps, right? But I think I've always had like a pretty good demeanor when it comes to because I don't know what's out there. I believed in God at one point in my life. I don't know if I do now. So it could be like totally wonderful past when we go. I don't know that. And I don't want to like project that on somebody. So it could like, you know what I mean? Like who knows? So
do you feel like, I feel like if I was a hospice nurse and I saw people die regularly, I kind of would get a sense of like, what's the point of it all? Like having like such achievement in your life or doing nothing in your life or pure enjoyments, like it all ends the same. Do you ever get a sense of like, what's the point?
Yeah, but all of us have these things in our lives that we celebrate, but we don't all celebrate them the same, even the most depressed person lives their life in a way that they're used to, so I think that unique human experience is really important, not just for you, but that shared life experience for everyone around you. So that's what I think more the point is like having these shared life experiences. If I can inspire Coté to go out there and read to the kids at the library, like, hey, or if I can get him to like, not walk around naked around the lake, like there's like all of those kind of things, you talk about keeping cool. But you know what I mean? So I think like maybe that's the point, is these unique human experiences that we have with each other really help us be better people to one another. And that's why I love open source. I was a mentor for a long time for the Drupal project. And I'm like, I love mentoring these people because now they're going to mentor and they're going to do this, or they're not going to do this thing, right? So
is Drupal on hospice?
I hope not.
I'm going to hold Drupal's hand. So that's interesting. So tell me about how being a hospice nurse compares to open source. They both are, you need a lot of empathy for each.
Yeah, you do. Because everyone poops. Everyone dies.
Eats chocolate.
And I think open source is that same way too. Like you don't even know you're using an open source project unless you're a nerd about it. I feel like it's like open source has this unique ability to bring out the best in people. And I think that life and death can do that too, right? And open source can bring out the worst in people. We know that. We've worked with some projects that keep lingering and you're like, you just got to go, right? Like here, take some morphine, roll over, just go to sleep, right? But I think that people who work in hospice, like volunteers and respite workers and caregivers and family members, and then people who work in open source, I mean, sometimes we don't want to work on open source and sometimes we don't want to take care of our families. But for the most part, it comes back to that altruistic sense, right? You're doing it because you love what you do, especially people who choose to work in hospice and choose to work in open source. You love what you do and you do it regardless of you get paid, regardless of, an award you might win, or, we love sharing our knowledge. We want people to be able to take care of themselves. We want people to be able to contribute back to open source. So there's some parallels on that, like really sort of ethereal plane, I think, rather than the like little nitty gritties. So
I was thinking, I've made a pessimistic assessment of what it might be like to be like, oh, do you just think what is the point? I can see the flip side of that now, where where the little moments in your own life, like with your kids or doing something special, would maybe feel that much sweeter, understanding the impermanence of it all.
Mm-hmm. And that's the thing too, right? That's something about open source too, is the impermanence, right? All of a sudden, someone like a big proprietary company will buy something, and now no longer a university can use the software. So there's that impermanence, and trying to find a new loved one, right? Or, I don't know, maybe that's stretching the metaphors a little bit.
The metaphor. Well, what do you think? You have a history of, I don't know, being perceptive about people and kind of their types, whatever, however you want to describe it. But like when you kind of think of the categorizing people in the open source world, like what are kind of like the characters, like the fun, in a good way, like the stock characters that you see repeatedly?
Oh God, I'm going to get in trouble with this one.
Good.
You've got your maintainers. Which are cool. They've proved that they know what they're doing and they're good for the project, but they're maybe less tolerant of things, like, they feel shit on a little bit, right? They're always having to do the things, and people shit on them too. Like, hey, you're the maintainer, do this little typo fix. And they're like, oh, that can be till the next release. And so I think maintainers have this sort of edge to them, like in the big scheme of things, that they're a little bit standoffish, right? And then you've got your teams, like your accessibility team or your front end team or your documentation team, and they're sort of supporting that. And I feel like the leadership changes more in those sub teams than that maintainer thing. I think the maintainers are sort of those cool kids, that you can't quite get to the table because they haven't left the Pac-Man shape, You know what I mean by that? Yeah.
Yes.
But so I feel like they're the cool kids that everyone wants to be, but also doesn't want to be. But those subgroups, like, I feel like they have this ability to change leadership a little bit more often and step down gracefully, which is nice. They're willing to learn to be a leader of another team. I always feel like those sub teams are, and not to be reductive of the way I say sub teams, but every open source project is set up a little bit different. I'm just trying to be generic. Is that they want other people to step in and help them. They want to try something new, so that rise and fall on that is a little bit of an easier ladder than when you're a maintainer, and stepping down isn't so graceful because you don't always have someone to help you. And I always try to tell people when I was doing mentoring in my different projects, like when I say no, like when I'm not doing the mentoring project anymore, it gives someone else a chance to say yes and step up, and I think that that's really important in that, that's that kind of lower leadership team of open source, is the ability to let yourself move on and try something else, and I think that helps our software dynamically learn too, is when I understand a little bit, like I do understand roles and responsibilities, and I do make clear distinctions. But when I understand a little bit more about how the accessibility team works with the front end team, it helps me do this a little bit more, and the merge requests are a little bit easier, right? Have you ever gotten a ticket where they're like, QA this page?
Yeah.
And you're like, sure. But then they cry because you've told them all the things that are wrong, We don't want to make developers cry, So, but I think when we all have that understanding, and then we've got the new kids, right, that are so enthusiastic. I love those new kids. Yeah. They're going to all the talks and they're doing all the hallway track, and they want to be invited to the party, but they're having a hard time infiltrating the sub cool kids, right? And our job as sub cool kids is to be like, hey, you're new. I haven't met you before. Why don't you hang out with my friends tonight? And those things, those people are really enthusiastic. I love those people because they don't know anything yet. So they don't know what to do wrong either. They're the best people. Like, what do you want to work on? You want to be a designer? Do you want to work on documentation? Do you want to do, UX? And then we've got those surly people who have been in the software for 20 years and don't have anything nice to say, but they're super smart. So you want to keep them around, but they're working on the API or something, right? So
was Drupal your gateway, your bridge from hospice nurse to tech?
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, I was working on a site. I'm not going to go into it because it's another story, but I was doing content entry. And I kept asking the developer, hey, I did this thing. Can you help me do this thing? And they're like, I'll just show you how to do the thing. And I couldn't wrap my head around it. And so I took kind of one of those boot camp classes where I learned how to do beginner's guide to Drupal for 6 weeks. And then at the end of it, they're like, oh, well, you're not a developer. I'm like, cool, you could have told me that before spending $6,000. But I'm
Also,
a people person.
What do they know? Yeah.
This is true. But we found a niche for me. I was a mentor because I'd be like, how do you write a patch? No, what? I just went to a conference. I just went to Contribution Day, and we spent 3 hours walking around with a thumb drive of pure getting something onto my computer, and I still didn't get anything. So the next year I go to DrupalCon again, and I would cry, and I'm like, this is bullshit. This is complete bullshit. You're always telling people anyone can contribute. Well, why can't I? Why isn't anyone teaching me how to write a patch? So my very first talk, and this is where I became a public speaker, and that's what I do mostly, like as far as like my open source contributions, was I went in front of people and I showed them how to write a patch. That was it.
Okay, nice.
And people were like, oh, I don't need a local environment? What? I don't need like this thing on my machine? I'm like, nope. And this is not cool. But it said, if I could do it, literally anyone can do it. But yeah, that was my first part, was like, they were always saying everyone can do it. And I'm like, no, you can't. I didn't leave like learning a skill. And so I'm really proud of this. The contribution days at Drupal sort of shifted into not just code-based contributions, but how can you like contribute to documentation? How can you contribute to event planning? All of those things. We really opened up that market for like project managers to get involved, or even interns and things like that, but I felt very inspired. And so I mentored for 8 years, probably in Drupal, like doing the core maintainer mentorship for code, even though I didn't know how to code, but I didn't have to, right? We all have our skills, but that's how it was that feel good, like teaching people something new, right? So I think if I was just a straight coder, I might not have like stayed as long or been as excited as I am now.
So to bring it back around, our exam's not quite written. We have a bunch of people together making questions. How many questions do they have to make? All the SMEs.
Okay. So that depends on what we think the volume is going to be like for a particular exam. Like some of those, like the volumes for those straight projects, we do a 2-year refresher where we look at the content again. So we try to keep items being a little bit evergreen, but that initial item pool, depending on the volumes we expect, it's typically between 200 and 300 items, because the exams itself are 60 questions, but we have 2 or 3 forms out in the wild. So we have enough questions to kind of fill in the forms. Sometimes we have duplicate questions, so we make sure that they're on different forms. The platform engineering exam, though, people were so excited about it. People were, I think I had 102 SMEs sign up, and probably like 50 content authors at some point, and like even more reviewers. So we knew that was going to be very exciting for people. So we opened that pool up to 500 items. That way we could rotate items more often. And because it's not quite a mature thing yet, and it's still evolving, we wanted to have room to like pull questions out and pull them in as they become antiquated or leaked. Sometimes that's a big problem, is leaking. If someone does a brain dump, then our questions no longer are exam defensible. So we have to rotate items in. So we do a little bit more items than what we think the 2-year refresh will have to bring.
And then you have 500 questions. And then what? How do you vet them?
So that's one of my jobs. My main job is making sure that the people feel supported, and that I keep encouraging them and keep engagement and like keep them wanting to participate in more and more exams. But the second thing that I do, or in conjunction, is I review items. I go into the platform in the back end and I review them. I do, because I come from a documentation background, working at opensource.com for years, I just want the facts, I don't want any scenario based, I don't want context. So I go in there and I do edits. I go in there and make sure, I can't always make sure that the content is relevant because I'm not a SME, but I can sometimes we have people who don't speak native English writing exam questions. So I go in there and make sure that they make sense. I make sure, you've heard this before, is there 1 correct item and 3 wrong yet plausible items, because people can weed out questions if they're not plausible. So I go in there and do checks and balances. And when I'm doing that, and this is the hard part, is I make sure think about it like, so there's 500 items. Say that first domain is, I don't even know the words. I'll do Drupal again because I know the words. Updating modules. So we want like 8 questions about updating modules. Sometimes you will write the same question as I, not exactly the same, but similar. So I mark those items as similar, and they get put on different exams, different, so we don't always have to have completely unique questions because there are different forms, right?
I think at a higher, after more of a higher level than this granularity, although I do find this interesting, but like you have 500 questions and you have 3 versions of 60. How do you pare that down? Like, how do you make sure, you in the back end surely aren't taking care of all 500 of those questions, and not to mention across multiple exams.
No. So what happens is we have like the 3 banks of items, right? Or the 3 banks of forms, and, say, some of them are overlapping, but each exam that gets taken, we rotate pre-test items in there too to test their quality. And then as an exam, either the content leaks or the stuff becomes antiquated. We have statistics in the background that will alert us if it becomes a bad item.
Is that just like it's a bad item if everyone misses it, or maybe
it's a bad item if everyone gets it right? Or maybe enough people like say the answer is A, but everyone seems to be answering C, because in the 6 months since we wrote the item, now C is a plausible answer. So we need to go in there and like clone it and make sure that it only has one answer again.
Interesting.
Yeah, but we have a psychometrician that does that, a person who looks at the math of the statistics and the psychology of the people. And they have that like kind of running in the background, Yeah, I don't know much of that science, but there is a person who does that.
There's like beta testing by qualified test takers. And then there's like cut score. I know as a SME, I took the exam. How does, what's that about?
Okay. So the beta we try to sort of pay attention to who in the beta is getting things right. We do a screening and we do invite people, but sometimes people will come in. But in the beta, there's the opportunity for them to tell us how much they studied for the test, how long they've been in the industry, how long they think they're an expert. So sometimes that's where that psychometrician stuff comes in, is their test scores are going to be a little different than that minimally qualified person. So we have these beta items that I kind of go through, and then our psychometrician will ask y'all, like, why did one person get this right and why did the other one get it wrong? And we sort of have these discussions. But then you get an assignment where you take the whole exam. You take all of the beta items, and you have the opportunity to say, I think there's 2 answers. Or I think we also do this like criticality scoring, like people, we haven't talked about it, but when we write the tested question, we say, we think 50% of people will get this right. And when you do that cut score, you do that again. You're like, I'm going to get the 75%. 75% of people are going to get this right. But Chris says 60% of people are going to get that right. So that deviation gets discussed too. And that's what makes it a harder and easy item. We talk about, is it an easy item? Is it a hard item? Do you want to change your mind? Because the test is weighted.
The SME, when they're taking the test, I don't know what the beta side is, but on my side, I say what I think is the right answer, and then it tells me whether I'm correct about it, and then I choose a percentage of how many test takers I think will get it right, just to be very clear about what's happening.
Yeah, that's called standard setting, and then we get together as a group and we look at those items where those scores are so deviated. Like, why did someone say only 5% would get it right, but the rest of the group says 75? And we discuss it, right? And all of a sudden people are like, oh yeah, one of those distractors is so easy, I can eliminate it right away, because we want you to do it because you're also testing the content for relevance too. But we're also looking at it from the point of view of, maybe you have forgotten what it's like to be that minimally qualified candidate, so that other person who comes in can help us sort of make that consensus. And from there, we get those scores. We decide how many easy items go on a form, and then we make sure that those forms have the same kind of items across the field, because it wouldn't be fair to put all the easy items on one exam and I take it and then you get all the hard ones. And so that's where all that math and reviewing and testing comes in, is creating those really like defensible forms at the end.
So how do you organize all this stuff? Like, do you have spreadsheets or sticky notes, or is there some software that people make tests have that does all of this, or what? So how do you keep track of it all?
We work in a platform, and the platform keeps track of all of it for us.
Okay.
I can download the stuff and I can tell you that I look at it, and I do, but I don't know what it says. But we do have a platform that keeps track of the statistics of the exam item as we go. And that's when we say, when we're doing that refresh, if an item turns red, then we look at it and make sure, like, why are people getting it wrong? Maybe there was a typo, maybe like something wasn't formatted right. Maybe like 2 words, like maybe when I edited the item, I got the word placement wrong, and like, if we can fix an exam item, we will.
And so will it be like, let's go to question 392, and like you bring that up on a screen, and there's like it has the question and then all the various notes and stuff that y'all have written about it.
So
whatnot, the figures.
It does keep track of everything, and that helps when we have to tell people why our exam is still good, that we did all these checks and balances. I have, like, in this platform that we use, every person that does a review manually will write it in there, and we have history of all the edits, and then we have history of the test taking, we have history of like how it's doing well over time.
Interesting how you go.
Okay. Do you think that, like, is doing this kind of stuff standardized enough that, like, after you take a 2-week vacation and then you have like 2 weeks on the job, you could just like jump into the SAT offices and be like, we're off to the races, right? Or does everyone use different software and they use different techniques, and like it's just all over the map?
It is fairly standardized. Every kind of, I know that's a cop out, but we can go from like company to company, like a person who does more exam. I'm not really an exam developer. I'm a SME coordinator. You know what I mean? Like everyone else does the work for me. But say we have an exam developer that goes from one company to another, they need that onboarding period, but it is pretty. If you're
using at least the same techniques and thinking, like everything you're going over is just theory. You weren't like, and then I click on this button and I select that drop down. It's more just like, here's the thing that we want to do.
Right.
Yeah.
And then, as a person who's new to this sort of field, I take education classes once a month and learn about how people cheat, learn about how people how test taking is different in India than it is in, Bangladesh, things like that, and so there's this education that comes along with it, just like anything, right? You can't just, learn software once and not, participate in continuing education, but it's a very interesting field to work in, that's for sure. But I'm glad I'm more of a people person because I love the people.
It's pretty amazing how you can bring together a pack of weirdos from all different walks of life and all different parts of the world and all different ideas of what good is, and like have them together produce something that the world can agree is a good test.
And I have I have no skin in the game, so it's easier for me to like wrangle y'all. You know what I mean? I'm like, okay, we've been talking about this for 12 minutes. Like, is it a good or is it a bad item? Like, are we going to accept it or are we going to reject it? We're not going to talk about the same word for the next 5 more minutes. Throw it out.
Yeah, I relate to that.
So why does the Linux Foundation do this? Like, certification things, like if
money.
I haven't checked out foundation stuff, but there's like, in a while, but you have the Eclipse Foundation, the Apache Foundation, like there'll be other open source foundations. And is it like part of being an open source foundation that you would do certification for your open source projects and related things? Or so I don't know, like, what do you think the reason is?
I don't have the exact answer for this, but I know that under the CNCF umbrella, when we have incubating projects, one of the things that helps them graduate to a full-fledged project, like maybe that's money involved or whatever, is to have course material or exam content. And that helps them go from that fledgling project to that graduated project.
Yeah.
I don't know what a graduated project means in the big scheme of things, but I know that those words come out of people's mouths when they talk about it.
Yeah. I mean, I could see like the, like I think the Linux Foundation has evolved into, I don't know, like a good neutral ground. Like, and part of what makes it a good neutral ground is it's big,
Yeah.
right? And
we
so
do
like
cover a lot of umbrellas. Yeah.
Exactly. And so instead of having, there's plenty of organizations that you may or may not worked in the past who also do certifications, all sorts of other ones. And those all seem fine. But then it's kind of like, well, who else is going to certify about all these open source things, right? Like, and it's probably one of the more trustworthy places.
Yeah, I agree with that. But I feel as I like meet more people and connect with more people on social platforms where they're announcing like what exams they're taking and stuff, I feel like more people are taking more different types of exams from different organizations these days. But I wonder how they vet those. I look at some of them and I'm like, they're so niche. I don't know if I would choose to get a certification from that company or for that project, because I don't know what is going to help me within my career path. I'm not saying the Linux Foundation is the only one, but I just sometimes there's so many out there. I don't know how someone who doesn't know how to choose, how they would choose.
Yeah. But is there some sort of way to give credentials to the credentials? Like, how do you show our exams actually mean something? We've gone through this process as opposed to...
We're certified and we have all the things. And that's why I always talk about exam defensibility, because we are certified under different organizations that say, yes, we're qualified to make these exams. And we have to follow certain rules, like those refreshes every 2 years. So we do have all those checks and balances in place to keep those certifications for the certification people relevant.
What are those? I think that would be valuable for the general public to know how a certification is certified. Yeah.
So we have a few different platforms, and I don't know, I'm not like, this is a little bit out of my domain, but I know we have ATP, which sets qualifications for how you build exams. And then ITCC is this bank of professionals that help you stay on board with like how your exam is defensible, like because proctoring, mind dumps, where we share our information with the use of AI, it's really complicated to keep your item bank secure, things like that. So like all these teaching tools are out there. And then like I, as a person who helps with the exam process, I have to keep track of how I keep track of keeping track, just to make sure. So if we're ever audited, I know, right? If we're ever audited, I can say, no, we never worked in GitLab. We never worked in Google Docs. We always kept it private. You know what I mean? So there's these certain things that I have to do in documentation to make sure that we continue to be certified to be certification specialists.
I think we're going to wrap soon, but I have one last question for you. I'm saving it for the end. Do you have a question, Coté, before I ask my final question?
Go ahead.
Oh, okay. My last question for you, as a hospice person, how do you hope that you yourself will die?
Well, I just got married recently in a relationship where I have no twinge of doubt that I am going to have another relationship as bold as this one. So I would hope that I would go first and that he's holding my hand, because I don't want to be alone with no one holding my hand when I die. So I hope, I don't want it to be quick. I want it to be like 3 to 5 days. That way people can come and visit and say goodbye if they want to.
Interesting.
I don't want to be selfish, but at the same time, I'm like, I do not know what's going to happen, but I would prefer to have Chris holding my hand the whole time. That's like that's biggest,
nice.
the most, like, that's what I hope. Like, that's the first spontaneous thought I have that comes to mind when you ask me that question.
That's fascinating, because you always hear, I hope I'll die fast. And you never hear, I hope I'll die in over 3 to 5 days.
Try to spring it out a little bit. I heard the drugs are really good though, so no. But no, I really do, because like I feel like a little bit isolated from my family living where I live because it's so expensive. So I think that like if people want to say goodbye, it gives them that opportunity to do that if they want to. And then it also keeps hospice nurses employed. It,
Always the greater good.
but I think that if we do
that.
have a chance to contemplate, that 3 to 5 days might be a really nice time to contemplate whatever we need to contemplate, or like make, I don't know. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
I just don't know. I wouldn't want it
you
to be
don't know, but you know better than most people.
I wouldn't want it to be spontaneous in case there's this like waiting period, right? So
yeah, that's nice.
Yeah, well, this has been fun. I've got a wide range of topics here, like all over the place, which is always nice to go over. It's
death, cockroaches.
Yeah,
I think I'm taking.
Yeah, I think from now on, I'm going to be thinking about the poop or chocolate conversation.
A game. It's a game.
Yeah. I have 3 kids of varying levels of poop or chocolate creation. So I think that could work out now. Well, yeah. So thanks for being on. If people wanted to like check out stuff that you have like a homepage on the World Wide Web or other accounts where you would send people?
I think LinkedIn is probably my most favorite account to share with people. And I'm Volkswagen chick.
What if people want to be an SME? Is there a place to know like what exams are being created?
Not necessarily what exams are creating in the long-term timeline sort of thing, but in the short term, if you want to get involved with the Linux Foundation, I sent you folks a link where it's like a kind of a generic SME form for people to fill out. But I think like on LinkedIn, following the Linux Foundation is a good place to start. Because they do have these broadcasts, but filling in that SME form, because I think the SME form is generic enough to ask about what kind of projects you're interested in. And then when I know what projects is in the horizon, I go through that SME form and I kind of look and see and sift through that. And then sometimes I do a blanket call for it too. But that SME form on the Linux Foundation page is probably the best place for people to start, or connecting with me on LinkedIn.
I can endorse being a SME. I found it to be an organized process. I thought you were fun to work with. I thought it was fun to collaborate with other people who are interested in platform engineering across other companies. I thought it was fun.
Now, Whitney, when you go talk with your non-tech friends, are you like, I'm a SME? And they're like, I have no idea what you're talking about.
No, I don't tell anyone outside of tech. I would never be like, I'm a subject matter expert. Like, this is only totally roll their eyes.
Only in the tech world circle of trust that you would. All right. Well, speaking of being in the circle of trust, you've listened to another episode of Software Defined Interviews. We'll put links to those things that we mentioned at softwaredefinedinterviews.com/104. And you can link to it. And I'll have to go check that stuff out too. Well, thanks again for being on. And with that, we'll see everyone next time. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.